like gold in my ear. Your parents were like, wow. My parents were like that. Gold in my ear was like, wow. I mean, there's people, and then there's people. And gold in my ear was kind of about, get this, even Neil Diamond. And my mom would, she would snap, not with her middle finger, but with her ring finger to the 8-track. Over and over again, Neil Diamond. Who did your parents really admire? They were like on TV or something, or the radio, they would say stop. And everything would just stop, and they would watch to hear what this person had to say. For us, it wasn't really Ted Williams or Mickey Mantle, the Sandy Koufax, because I grew up in that way. But there was one person who was above all the others. And from my parents, and I didn't even know it. I didn't even know about this person until we happened to be in a Jewish event. And this person walked in, and my parents were. He had to push me and say, you have to go shake hands with this person. I'll tell you who it was in a moment. It was pretty cool. Kol Nidre. Ancient. The melody, not as ancient, but still really old. But it just something about so old and just so penetrates who we are, and it is so relevant to today. When we say stuff and we think we mean it, or maybe we don't. Done a couple of silly things. It's something to be forgiven for, maybe not, I don't know. But people say, how are you doing? 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 And you know what I say sometimes? I say, funny you should ask. And you know the look on their face, how are you doing? I say, funny you should ask, and they go, because they knew that I'm about to say something about how I'm doing. And they're like, why did I say that? But we do that a lot. We say a lot of things that we don't totally mean. I often say, funny you should, and I'm just kidding, I'm doing fine. Just to see their reaction. But we say things. We say a lot of things. We say a lot of things in Kol Nidre. So ancient. But it so speaks to today. There's a deep, deep wisdom. So the person that I had to shake the hand of, and this hand did shake. When I was a little kid, I did shake this person's hand. I haven't washed it since. Was Dr. Saban. You know who Dr. Saban is? Yeah. There were two doctors who worked really hard to try to eradicate polio. And they came up with slightly different treatments. One of them came up with it first, the other one got more credit for it. They're both Jewish guys. One of them was Dr. Saban. And I tell you, I suspect that my parents responded to him coming into the room the way devout Catholics would have if they saw Mother Teresa. It's different than if Paul McCartney walked into the room. It wasn't, it was just, and I remember that very vividly. I was a really little kid at the time. I remember that vividly. This person saved lives. This person was such a hero. Today we've got a regular pandemic, regular plague, like a biblical proportion. And we've got this Judaism that's really, really old. We understand plagues. But do we understand vaccines? You know, they say vaccines, except for people that have a religious exemption. Some places require it. Have a mandate for a vaccine, a mandate for masks. What does Judaism say? What does Judaism say about vaccines? Does it say anything? It doesn't know from vaccines. It doesn't know from vaccines, right? Judaism was written thousands of years ago. Vaccines, I mean, they're a little bit earlier than my lifetime. Wearing a mask to prevent disease is kind of my lifetime. That's not that old, wearing masks, that new technology to wear masks. Does Judaism, what does it say? Is there religious exemption, Jewish religious exemption? Well, even though it is ancient, Judaism has a lot to say about vaccines and about mandates, government mandates. I mean, what is Kol Nidre? Kol Nidre is about words that we say that obligate us. And we can call them oaths or promises or vows or covenants or contracts or keeping our word. You're just going to keep your word. That's what Kol Nidre is about. How do you keep a word that you said to keep them? What about keeping someone else's words? Are we obligated to do that? You know, like if your partner says, yeah, absolutely, we'll get it to you for only $75 a piece. And you run up the numbers and you see, oh my gosh, it costs you 80 and he's selling them for 75? Do you have to keep your word? Your partner's word? Do you have to do that? Words that other people say and obligate us. Is that part of Kol Nidre? Maybe. Maybe. What about if a community says something, binds us all to it, and it's not an oath or a promise, but it's the king that gives out an edict, and you have to keep the edict. Or in modern day terms, the community comes up with a mandate. The community, the leaders of the community, come up with a mandate that we have to keep it. What does Judaism say about that? Is that related to Kol Nidre? Not words that we spoke, but words that other people spoke. Do we have to maintain those obligations? But Judaism has an awful lot to say. It has an awful lot to say about edicts and about governments. And interestingly, I'm going to paraphrase and generalize some things and give you specific examples, but mostly in the generalness, Judaism values the health of the community as much, if not more so, than the desires of the individual. And so, when we had our own country in biblical times, the government was able to put out edicts, and we had to follow them. Edicts like taxations, edicts like rationing, an edict like conscription into military service, or even taking land if it was needed for a purpose. Those were mandates, and we had to follow them. And then, fascinatingly, when we went into captivity in Babylonia in 586 BCE, 2,500 years ago, more than 2,500 years ago, we were no longer living in our own land. Nebuchadnezzar, who, was Nebuchadnezzar. I don't know why people don't name their child after him. The king of Babylonia destroyed Jerusalem and the temple and took us off as captives to Babylonia. And our great prophet, Jeremiah, wrote to the people in Babylonia, to the community in Babylonia, and he said, now this is a community that conquered us. They conquered us. He said, pray for the welfare of this Babylonian kingdom. Hope that they do well. Isn't that an interesting statement? Pray for their welfare. Hope they do well. We give an awful lot of weight to governments and to edicts that come down from governments. There's a rabbinic expression, Dina de Malchuta Dina. Dina means the law. It's Aramaic, so da means like of the, or shall, in Hebrew. Malchuta, Malchut, Melech, Malchut. Melech is king, Malchuta is kingdom. Dina de Malchuta Dina. The law of the kingdom is law. It's as though it is Jewish law from the Torah. What the king says you have to follow, as though it were a Jewish king. Now this is a really interesting Why? Why? Because in the Talmud it says, you pray for the welfare of the kingdom, because without a kingdom and without leadership, the people will kill each other. The welfare of everybody is better off because there is a government. And I'm going to add, even a bad government. I'm not talking about a horrible, horrific government, but even a bad government. Even a bad government, one that's not very good. You pray for the welfare of, because without it, people perish. They're going to kill each other. So at what point does it become not a bad one, but a government which is so bad that you don't follow it, if the government is telling you to kill people? If the government is bringing about the death of people? If they're misappropriating resources so that people die? If they're causing conflict in the community so that people are turned on one another? And it's an interesting question if you're conscripted to a war, because then you are actually called upon to kill other people. That's an interesting question, Jewishly, whether you follow that edict or not. But to the point, the case in point is, look at the porn story. That was a rotten government. Really bad. The king was a drunkard. There was a really evil guy who was running things behind the scenes, whose name I'm not even going to mention. But that story is told in such a way that you don't overthrow the government. You work within the government. You don't work for anarchy. You support You support what the king says, and the king's rulings, when the king gave his advisor that ring and came up with an edict, that was really, really bad because we Jews follow king's orders. And that was a pretty horrible one that involved killing people. Like us. We weigh heavily. Well, we weigh heavily mandates from the state. If we don't like them, our tradition tells us how to work within the confines of the state, because we're better off with the government. We are really, really blessed that we have a government that we can be involved in. Someone told me, and I believe it, the most patriotic thing you can do, if you're not in it for yourself or for selfish reasons, is to be involved in government, be elected, be appointed to some position, big or small, on the board of the library. I mean, that's not so small. It's one of the most patriotic things you can do. To help shape government from within. And so when we look at something like a mandate to wear masks, is there a Jewish exemption? Does Judaism say no to it? Well, we have to look at it. Is it for the good of the people? Well, we value doctors' opinions. Even in the Talmud, a doctor has certain rights that no one else has. The doctor can do things that endanger people's lives that no one else can do with the hope of healing them. Only doctors have that privilege, according to our tradition. We value science. We value medicine, even in its primitive stages. Thousands of years ago, we value that. We value government. And we look, is it for the good of the community? We would say, and I think this has something to do with the way I interpret Judaism. And I can show you a lot of different passages like it. That getting a vaccine is good for you, but it's also good for the community. Maybe if you were to get a vaccine, you're making my life safer. If I were to get a vaccine, I'm making your life safer. If the government were to mandate vaccines, we as Jews follow government mandates, except if they're to kill one another. And this is not to kill one another. And we have to look at it by the standards of the government. Does this help our community? If you're opposed to vaccines, you're free to be a part of government and to help shape government. I'm not, Jewishly, that is an encouraged position. Work from the inside for what you think is best. But whatever comes out, whatever mandates or edicts come out, Judaism says we follow them as though they are written in the Torah. Now, there are some exceptions. They're pretty extreme. They deal with incest. They deal with public worship of idols. They deal with killing other people. But for the most part, Judaism says work within the government that you have, even if it's not a good government. Work within it. Isn't that interesting? I found that to be very, very interesting. In a world today where we don't know who to listen to, because we're bombarded with all kinds of different opinions. In a world today where people turn into their heart and say, well, what feels right for me? What do I wish was the right thing? Judaism says it's not about what's in your heart and what you wish is right. We have an incredible heritage of wisdom from thousands of years of people who were literate and wrote down and processed how to apply this wisdom to this situation. We have an anchor in a turbulent world. We have our heritage. And our heritage is not obsolete. It tells us how to look at the situations, even though they might not know from vaccines. We know from how to rate something whether it's good for the community or not. We know how to see things in a bigger picture, how to work within a community, the leadership of a community. Judaism is not a religion. Well, Judaism is an adult thinking religion. It's an adult religion. It happens to be really good for kids too. But there is a tremendous depth of wisdom. This whole Yom Kippur ceremony, if you haven't been in temple in a long time, we're so glad you're here. We're so glad to have you swimming in the waters. There is an ocean. There is an ocean of Jewish wisdom and learning that in this senseless world can anchor you, can give you a lot of direction, a lot of sense. It's our heritage. It's our inheritance. It's our heritage. And I invite you, not only on Yom Kippur, to come and to learn. We're going to take a look at Psalms on Yom Kippur afternoon, but throughout the year, to learn about this wonderful, wonderful heritage that is your inheritance, that your parents and grandparents handed down, what they idolized is relevant for you. I invite you to come and to take part in exploring and finding it throughout the year. With that, I want to give you a little bit of an overview of the next few hours. And Yom Kippur seems like it's so long, it'll be over like that, sort of. We are told no eating, no drinking, no washing, no intimate relations with your spouse, no wearing of fancy things like perfumes or leathers, nothing that glorifies the body. You sort of, your body says, and you say, I don't have to. And when you do that, you show how powerful you are. Because if you can overcome your desire for food, you can overcome your desire to sin. If you're strong enough to fast, it correlates to being strong enough to overcome sin. It also makes you a little bit more trite, a little humbler. It connects you with people who are hungry. There's a big difference. You know when your next meal is going to come. Tomorrow night at about sundown, you'll be given a bag. We would love to have a whole break fast. You can't do it. You're going to be given a bag with a couple of really goodies from our sisterhood. Thank you very much, sisterhood. To go home and to break the things. There are some people that don't know when they're going to eat things. You're connecting a little bit today. Cherish it. These feelings, I hope you only have them once a year. Of your body really crying out. Pay attention to it. You'll learn a lot from it. There are some people for whom fasting is a dangerous activity. If you need to take some medicine and you have to have food for that medicine, you have the medicine, you have the food. You do that. If you got kids, they're not obligated to fast. If you're a diabetic and you can't fast, you don't. If you're breastfeeding or you're pregnant or some situation where you need to eat, you go right ahead. I tell kids, the Yiddish word for eat, anyone know how to say eat my child in Yiddish? Es mein Kinder, es. Essen mein Kinder. Yeah, and es means to eat. So I came up with the 3 S's. S. So you can, if you cannot fast, at least have a fast from these 3 S's. No seconds, have a meal but no seconds. No snacks, and no sweets. And see if you can do that with kids. Eat, you eat, and really appreciate what you're eating. You're not going to get seconds, that's it. It's what's there is there. And no snacks, and no sweets. We're going to reconvene tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. It's where there's a longer personal confession. The words that we read from Torah and Haftarah are some of the most important words that were ever said on earth. But before your life and death, therefore choose life. And Isaiah tells us what we're doing this fast for. How it's not a terribly long service. It's a real service, but not terribly long. Then we're going to convene at 1 o'clock for a family service led by Cantor. And then we have the study group here at, someone tell me the time. I think I know, but I don't want to say the wrong time. It's at 3 o'clock. 3 o'clock study?
Yes.
Yep. And then someone tell me what time we reconvene for Yisker? Yisker, where we remember 4:30, where we remember anyone that died. And we're going to go right from there into the late afternoon service. And then you're going to hear that shofar. Oh, wow, when you hear that and everyone is here. Whoa, wow. Then you know you did it. You overcame your urges and you can overcome sin. You can do it. And you go home and you get ready for your sukkah. And I hope you've ordered your lulav and your etrog. Minnie and I got a few extra if you haven't ordered one. You can get it from us. It'll be here. But it's wonderful to have your lulav and etrog. It was a connected holiday in ancient times. We were all in Jerusalem for almost a month. Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot. It was all the same. Simchas Torah. It was all kind of aspects of the same holiday. What's that? Oh, right o'clock. Right. Why don't you tell us about what's happening at 9 o'clock?
I'll be starting with some morning inspirational prayers and an opportunity to prepare for the day, just to make it 1 hour longer for you, just like that. But it's a great way to kind of prepare for those prayers with some blessings and some melodies and just an opportunity to take a breath and get your head in the right place for the rest of the day.
How many people were there for spiritual awakenings for Rosh Hashanah? We've never done it before. Raise your hand if you were there for it.
A few people.
Keep your hand up if you thought it was amazing.
A few people.
It was amazing. It was really lovely. Really lovely.
Thank you.
Not everyone appreciates the subtleties of all the details of our prayers. But Cantor does, and he brings them out. That'll be at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. That'll be here. Are there any other really important announcements that people have? I'm looking at you. With that, we're going to go to it's on page
Okay.
280, 280, we rise and open the ark.